Terry Crews is a good example of the left selling out and really just the whole anti male agenda. Taking something that is a serious thing, such as victimhood or oppression or racism, and twisting it into a sort of, you know, anti male blanket hatred kind of thing. This is a great example of how ultimately it's the fascist playbook. If you go back and you listen to what Germany did in World War II, how they did it. This is how they did it. You play victim, and then you create a boogeyman, you create a monster, you create an enemy, and then it's very subtle because people who lack nuance, and really it affects people who are less intelligent. People who lack nuance struggle with, deciphering this and what this type of speech. And what happens is they begin to, without even realizing it, they begin to hate or just become bigots, themselves against all men. So let's watch this to kind of understand what he's saying. I didn't watch the whole thing. I'm only a couple minutes in because I think that's all I really need. I don't really care if he's talking about Diddy or whoever actually assaulted him. I'm not saying that he's lying. I'm not discounting what happened to him. It's just that let's pay attention to the rhetoric that he uses, to explain or to point the finger at who did it to him.
It's Terry Crews. I'm an actor, author, former athlete, advocate, and a survivor of a sexual assault. This past year, we have seen powerful men in Hollywood and elsewhere finally held accountable for sexual harassment and assault. We also saw the backlash survivors faced after coming forward. I wanted these survivors to know that I believed them, I supported them, and that this happened to me too. This encouraged me to come forward with my own experience and reflect on the cult of toxic masculinity that exists in our society. Then, in 2016, while at a party with my wife.
Okay, so he says a cult of toxic masculinity. Now, the problem is that what happens is that phrase, toxic masculinity, has been misused and abused and used to attack men, used to hate men by feminism. So it sounds innocuous at first. It sounds nice and normal and, oh, you just toxic masculinity. It's this cult of people in Hollywood, which there absolutely are. I do not doubt his story, in the events that happen, the factual events that probably happen with him and many other men and women, right? Which you got to pay attention to, because the Me Too movement, which I hope is over, has been used as a weapon against all men, and a lot of false accusations came out. I read a chart the other day that false accusations make up, I think, a large percent of all SA cases. You can Google that, but it's a large percent is false accusations, right? Which can ruin a person's life, right? If feminism and the Me Too movement, etc., uses that as a weapon, it easily can, and it easily does. So really it's kind of a reverse bigotry. It's like some people have been oppressed, some people have been affected by certain people in power, whether they're men or women, because it can happen to men and women. And if you look at the charts of sexual assault, you look at the charts and the facts, the statistics, men get sexually assaulted just as much as women. And I'm talking about the real statistics, not the skewed, messed up CDC. And I can prove all this. The CDC has skewed the statistics for grape and an essay, because what they did was they changed the definition of male grape from grape to forced to penetrate. Forced to penetrate. So when you change the definition of something, it skews the statistics because they no longer register it the same way. So when they say, oh, women are graped more than men in this percentage, it's because the statistics are skewed because they changed the definition. This is what the CDC did. You can Google it. There's a woman named Mary Koss, Koss, Mary Koss. She did this, I believe, in the early 1990s. She changed the definition of male grape, and it skewed the whole thing. So when feminists are out there yelling, "Oh, women are being oppressed more than men. This is our facts. We got this grape statistic, this essay statistic." Da, da, da. They're not telling the truth. They're not telling the objective truth. They may believe in what they're saying. They're not overtly lying because they're repeating what they've heard. But the fact is the truth is that these statistics are skewed, right, on purpose. I absolutely believe it's a conspiracy, because there are people who are in power who benefit from pushing forward feminism. There are people in power who benefit from pushing forward this divisive tool to break up marriages, to destabilize our country, to weaken family units. It's on purpose. It's planned social engineering. If you don't believe me, study Yuri Bezmenov, a man named Yuri Bezmenov, Yuribesmenov, Yuri Bezmenov. He talks all about it. He talks all about socialism. He talks about feminism. He talks about how these things are social engineering. They're planned ideologies, planned institutions to destabilize our country, right? So this speech falls into that category. Again, you're taking something that is real, which is the swamp that is Hollywood, right? Which is real. That's not, made up. And you're assigning this verbiage of toxic masculinity onto it. Well, what does that do? That latches all men. Because what is masculinity? Masculinity means maleness. It means what men are. It means how men are. What is toxic masculinity? There's no definition here. It's just this broad, sweeping statement, meaning it could be whatever you want it to be. It could be, oh, this man just doesn't agree with me, therefore he's toxic. He's exhibiting toxic masculinity, therefore he's an abuser. And this is how women have taken that phrase and grabbed up feminism and ran with it as a weapon against all men. Oh, I didn't get what I want, therefore the man is toxic. Oh, he's not the perfect man who's bending over backwards for me, who's buying me things and doing everything I want. He's toxic. I've seen it. It's how they do it, right? Now, is this an example? If we're objectively looking at the phrase toxic masculinity, which I do think there's such a thing, it's just that there's also toxic femininity, right? It's just men aren't out here doing the same thing. Men aren't out here weaponizing these phrases and ideologies in order to tear down men. In order to tear down women. What men are doing is we're out here speaking our truth. This is why we have the red pill. This is why we have MGTOW. This is why we have the men's right movement, the men's rights movement, and then anybody who's just telling their truth. There is such a thing as misandry, right? If there's such a thing as misogyny, there's such a thing as misandry. If there's such a thing as toxic masculinity, then there's such a thing as toxic femininity. I know what toxic femininity is because I've experienced it many times with women that I've dated, with women that I've been around. There's a certain toxic femininity, and it's not, maybe it's not quite the same thing as what he's talking about here. But again, he's talking about a fringe group of people who've consolidated power in Hollywood, and you could even extend that to politics. I'm not going to go too deep down this conspiracy rabbit hole, but you could extend that to politics. He's talking about a fringe group, a small cluster of extremely rich men and powerful men who own certain sectors of Hollywood, who own movie studios, the P. Diddy's of the world, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, etc. right? And he's using this word toxic masculinity, so he's lumping indirectly all men. Now women might come in and say, well, oh no, that's only the toxic ones. Well, really, it's not even only the toxic ones, because these guys aren't even your average toxic males, toxic masculinity males. They're even extremely more fringe than that. How many men on this planet own a movie studio? Not many, right? Maybe 100. How many movie studios out there are operating? Hundreds, a couple hundred. I mean, even in a big way, maybe less than 50, right? And and there's how many billion men on the planet? 4 or 5 billion men on the planet. It doesn't make sense. So this is a subtle way to throw all men under the bus. And Me Too was used very, very much as a tool to continue the misandrous man hatred that radical feminism implemented, and a lot of it was a solid attempt to justify that radical feminist hatred towards men. Oh, look at what these men are doing. See, I told you there's a patriarchy. See, I told you it's toxic and it's all about power and oppression. Well, what do you mean? This is, again, it's a fringe group within Hollywood. It's not even all the directors or the actors or the movie studio executives or the studio owners. It's not even all of them. It's only some of them. How many? You got what? Cosby 1, R. Kelly 2, Diddy 3, Harvey Weinstein 4. Who else? Maybe there's a few other ones that I haven't thought of, but it's under 10 probably. The main famous ones. Maybe there's more that I just don't know about, but I can't even think of one. I can't even think of 5 right now. So really, it's a crazy, lumping in of all men, and it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon because this is how unfortunately, the feminist movement throws men under the bus, and it's sad because really it hurts women too, because when you tell women that men are oppressive to them, when you lie to young women and give them a reason to be scared of men and to hate men, you ruin that young woman's life. You ruin her future. She probably wants to be married and to be happy in a good relationship with a man, right? She probably wants to be a mother someday. She probably wants to be happily married, and yet you're coming in and you're telling her that men are oppressors. You're lying to her. You're telling her that men are toxic and that masculinity should be feared, and masculinity is something that needs to be scared of or something. And it's sad. Now, does this discount people who are really SA? No, their voices should be heard, and they should get justice, and they should be respected, and their experiences should be understood, period. That's great, but don't, while you're doing it, throw all men under the bus. And I think that this Terry Crews guy is, I think he's a puppet. I think he's a tool, because I think Hollywood, which is a weird, twisted thing, it's part of the propaganda machine. There's factual evidence that the CIA is involved in making movies. This is propaganda. There's twisted, weird stuff. If you really piece the dots together and you go back and you study, like, propaganda in World War II, and then what happened to these propaganda leaders after World War II. They came to America and they joined the FBI and the CIA. They learned how to subvert nations. They learned how to, there's some weird, creepy stuff going on, and you gotta, think of where the trail is leading. You gotta be like, what's going on? Why is it happening? Who's starting it? Where's the source? So a lot of what's going on today is you see a lot of really messed up, degenerate behavior. Where's that coming from? It's coming from this leftist SJW mindset. It's coming from this liberal, socialist, mindset. And then when you do your research, you do your Googles, and you study where this stuff comes from, a lot of it is subversion. A lot of it's communist subversion from the USSR, or the old USSR. If you study Yuri Bezmenov, he talks about that. Again, a lot of the concepts and the masterful way they figured out how to implement propaganda comes from World War II. Comes from that group of people who's doing it. Saying, "Oh, this whole group of people is bad and they're oppressing us," and da da da. It's the same playbook. It's just being implemented domestically during peacetime, not wartime. We're not in a civil war. Hopefully not yet. Hopefully it will never happen. But they've done a lot to do that. They've pitted left versus right. They've pitted certain sectors of our country against other sectors, and you got to wonder why. If it's men versus women, if it's left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, you got to wonder what's the purpose of that. It's to destabilize and weaken our nation. Why? Because it's easier controlled. People who are weak and destabilized and who are disenfranchised, they tend to not want to love and support their country. They tend to not want to have a lot of love and fealty for their country. So if there ever was a time when somebody wanted to subvert us and take us over, there would be it wouldn't be as much of a fight. And it's the same reason they want to take away your guns. You could call it fear mongering. You could say, "Oh, you're being paranoid. These are all just conspiracy theories." But there's no arguing with the evidence. You've got constant ideologies being pushed. You've got constant attacks in various waves, right? Against men, against guns, against even the family unit. I mean, look at abortion. The fact that it's legal, which is sick, messes women up when they have an abortion, messes them up emotionally. You've got to push for, you go study feminism and what it does. It pushes for degeneracy. It normalizes promiscuity and immorality. I mean, these things are uniform. And then again, if you're a Christian, you look at what's behind it all and you say, well, it's just Satan. It's just evil. This is just evil being implemented. This is just, step by step social engineering of evil. People are accepting degeneracy, accepting immorality, becoming more and more atheists, farther and farther away from God. They don't hold marriage in honor. What does the Bible say? It says hold marriage in honor, right? It says men and women should be married. Don't fornicate. Don't sleep around. There's a reason why. It's for protection. It's to protect you against emotional damage. There's a verse that says sin wars against the soul. It wars against the soul. Meaning when you commit sin and you live in sin, you are warring against your soul. You're damaging your own soul. I've experienced that. That's part of my testimony as a Christian. I've went out and I've been and I've partaken in immorality, and it damaged me. It hurt me. I reaped what I sowed. Right? And it's tempting. You get tempted. The world we're living in a world where sin is very tempting, and it seems easy. It seems like there's going to be no consequences, but that's not really the truth. There is consequences. There's damage to your heart, to your soul, to your spiritual walk, to the integrity of your life. And people who throw away God and who are farther and farther away from God, they tend to not have morals. They tend to believe in moral relativism. They tend to believe, really, it's just Satanism. Do as thou wilt is the whole of the law. Moral relativism is just a funny phrase and way of saying do as thou wilt, right? There is no morals. It's morals are subjective. I've heard that over and over talking with atheists over the last decade. Morals are subjective. No, they're not. They're not, though, right? They're really not. Right and wrong is an objective thing, and the problem is that people don't have a moral compass. That's the problem. The problem is people don't have a moral compass. So this is all part and parcel of that, and then to play victim and to pretend like you're oppressed, etc., is part of that. pretend like you're oppressed, play victim. And even if you are oppressed, I'm not doubting that this man, Terry Crews, was, how I've heard his story a little bit more in depth. I don't know if he was actually physically assaulted. We don't know. He doesn't really go in. I don't think he ever really goes into those details. He might, but I can't remember if he does. But I think he was just propositioned. I think he told the story, and he said something like he was in an executive's office and they were trying to give him a role, and they came on to him or something like that and said, if you want to get this role, you got to do sex stuff with me right now, or whatever. Okay, maybe that's true, but that's not the same thing as being sexually assaulted. Sexually assaulted is when you are actually physically, touched against your will. Maybe he was. Maybe the guy who did it actually touched him and tried to grab him. I think that might be. I think I remember his story. He said the guy grabbed him or something like that. But that's not quite the same thing as, forced to penetrate or whatever, or being... Anyway, I don't want to get too sordid into that crap, but it's not quite the same thing. But yes, I'm not devaluing what happened. That if he got groped or grabbed, that's absolutely assault. That's absolutely SA. So I'm not trying to demean what he's saying. It's just that when he uses these phrases like toxic masculinity, and then he's jumping into the Me Too movement himself. It's what Hollywood people do. They tend to love to play victim because there's a lot of currency in victimhood. There's a lot of exposure and fame, and there's money in being a victim. There is, and it's sad. And again, I'm not trying to discount what he went through. I just question, to some extent, his motives for doing all this. Now, granted, if he's out here, really trying to help people, and he wants to just throw his hat in the ring and say, yes, I was a part of this, okay, fine, cool. But again, when you use those phrases, toxic masculinity, when you you're getting into that realm of radical feminism. You're starting to lump all men in together. What about toxic masculinity? What about toxic femininity? What about all the times where men get essayed? What about all the times when men try to speak up and there's no media for it? It's not the same thing. Men are not treated in the same way. A man being harmed is generally not treated. A man being harmed by a woman is generally not treated in the same way as a woman being harmed by a man. But let's go on a little bit and see if he has anything else to say.
I was sexually assaulted by a successful Hollywood agent. The assault lasted only minutes.
Okay.
But what he was effectively telling me while he held my genitals in his hand was that he held the power.
Okay.
That he was in control.
Mm-hmm.
The first reaction was to be violent. And I immediately held back.
Why weren't you? You're a big, powerful man. Why didn't you?
Senator, as a black man in America,
say it as it is. I think it's important.
You only have a few shots at success. You only have...
Okay, maybe. All right, maybe, he didn't want to hit the guy or push the guy off or whatever because, he feared that he may never have worked in Hollywood again, and that may be true, maybe. But I don't know, man. It's it really and then he's playing up the black card. Well, I'm black, and you're really layering on the victimhood. Now, in this case, it sounds true. In this case, it's probably genuine. But as far as how much is he acting? How much is he playing the victim? It stands to reason, actually, if he's coming out now and talking about it here, he's gaining something from this. He has to be. He's gaining something from this. Otherwise, he might be in fear, because if okay, he didn't physically harm the man, but if he's coming out and talking about it, then executives are going to want to stay away from him. They're going to be like, oh man, there's Terry Crews. He's the one who called us all out and lumped us all into that toxic masculinity category. I don't want to hire him because he might say something about me, not that I'm guilty or whatever. He might just try to, say I did it to him or something. It's a weird, I don't know. But then you could say that's how women feel, is they feel like if I come out and speak against men in power who harmed me, then I might not ever find work again, and that's fine. That's fair. So you could applaud him and say, okay, he's risking his career and his future by standing up and saying something. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of currency in being a victim, and again, it's not to discount what these people. It's not to discount any genuine victims, right? It's just to say, I don't know. But I hope, let's put it this way: if people come out, with the whole thing with Diddy and stuff, and if people come out and speak their truth and it changes things, then that's great. That's great. Honestly, if people come out and it really changes, if there is a toxic culture in certain people with power, and there is that, then fine. Let's talk about it and let's expose it and let's end it. But what I hate to see, and I've seen it so much, is men being attacked just because we're men. Masculinity being demonized just because it's male. That's when it's just taken too far, and that's why I hate these phrases, toxic masculinity, and I hate these, I hate the results. It's not that I'm trying to discount things that have happened. It's just that it's gone too far. It's like a witch hunt. It's the same thing with like racism in a sense, because it's like there are black people out there who are trying really hard to live a good life, who are working super hard, who are trying to have a career, doing all the right things. And then there are black people out there who want to join gangs and they want to be criminals and things like that, and they're giving all the rest of the black people a bad name, right? And then you say, oh, well, why did this cop shoot this black person? Maybe because he experienced messing around with gang members, and this person looked like a gang member, and he didn't know if the guy had a gun, and the guy was reaching for his pocket and he shot him or something. It's like, is that racism, or is that just honest stereotype? Because sometimes you have to stereotype. Oh, here's a guy who looks like he could harm me, because I've been in these experiences again and again, and this guy fits the description. So you would say, oh, that's racism, but really he's just reacting. It's a natural reaction. So it's hard to say, man. It's like it's a complicated thing, but I think that toxic feminism has damaged a lot of people and a lot of women, and I think that we need to be careful. Be careful who you demonize. Be careful how you demonize them. Be careful when you're using lump terms. Oh, it's all masculine, because then you're damaging. You're not just damaging men. You're damaging women as well. It's not that, I think no one wins in that scenario. No one wins in those type of ideologies. Because women want men, women want women are attracted to masculine men. Men are attracted to feminine women. And when you try to blur those lines and you try to make everything equal and you try to demonize one gender over the other, you're playing with fire and you're messing things up. But anyway, I think I made my point. Appreciate you guys listening. It's been Jay Lee, Northwest Podcast. Peace.